Over now to Patrick Cockburn. He's a columnist and independent at the Independent newspaper and author of several books, including The Rise of Islamic State. Joins me now from Cork in Ireland. Good to have you with us, Mr. Cockburn, on the programme. How credible is it that ISIL are alive and well in Afghanistan, and where is this intelligence coming from?
Well, they're certainly present there. The UN says they have 1,500 to 2,200 fighters there. Where the information is coming from, probably from an informant or intercepted communications. But this is a very chaotic situation. So having definitive information like this is almost impossible at the moment.
Is it just a convenient, you might say, a moment to have like a bogeyman available for both the Taliban and for NATO and NATO allies to say, you know, there is this other dark force at work to sort of distract, you might say, or frighten the locals at their own inadequacies of trying to handle what's going on inside and outside of the airport?
That's an interesting point. One of the things that the US demanded from the Taliban during the negotiations in Doha was that the Taliban shouldn't have an open door for Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda type organizations like ISIL, which they agreed to. But first of all, in the present situation, it might not be easy for them to do anything about it. When you at the airport, I mean, all you need is a truck with explosives on board and difficult to stop. But there is one important point about the Taliban that I think people miss out on, which is before 2001, the Taliban needed Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden provided money, provided fanatical fighters for the front line. And of course, they assassinated with 2 suicide bombers, the leader of the Northern Alliance, Ahmad Shah Massoud. So this was, the Taliban no longer need an alliance with Al-Qaeda. And it's much in their interest, indeed, that they shouldn't have one.
Whether we talk about post-2001 or pre-2001 or post-2001, just for our international viewers, in terms of the way that ISIL is made up, I mean, you know, we mustn't perhaps think of it as a legitimate force, an army that is controlled by central command. Many experts I've spoken to in the last couple of days have talked about ISIL being very isolated right now, and it could be just the odd suicide bomber here or there. Is that the sort of ISIL we're looking at?
It sort of is, but the odd suicide bomber here and there can do an awful lot of damage, you know, particularly against soft targets. It appears to have been them that attacked this Shia Hazara school in Kabul earlier in the year and killed 85 school children. There was an attack on a hospital. You know, these things aren't difficult to do with a couple of suicide bombers who don't have any expertise other than to blow themselves up.
I mean, it's been quiet so far, but the Taliban did release many ISIL operatives inadvertently in those prison releases. Do you think the Taliban are going to have to deal with ISIL in some shape or form sooner rather than later?
I think they will after they've won a great victory, and they'll want to assert their power over all of Afghanistan. They'll also want acceptance by other countries, you know, for reasons we've just been hearing about now. They need aid, they need food and so forth. So it's in their interest to say, we are the barrier against ISIS. You may not like us, but there could be worse to come. So it's much in their interest to do that. At the same time, the Taliban and ISIL and Al-Qaeda do appeal to the same constituency. At various points, they're interchangeable. Many of the ISIL leaders are former Taliban. So you too have these 2 different processes, an impulse for the Taliban to crack down, which is very strong, but at the same time, ISIL isn't so far different from their own organization.
Something else really to ponder on, because they've been sworn enemies, so they say, for many years, fighting, you might say, a puppet government in Kabul, supported by the West. So how does the current situation then change the way ISIL, if they are well organised and funded, from acting successfully in a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan? You know, will they see the Taliban now as much as the enemy as the West, because they have a different sort of Islamic ideology?
Well, ISIL, you know, as we saw in Iraq and Syria, tends to think of practically everybody as an enemy apart from itself, and is perfectly prepared to kill them. And we have countless examples of that. So this might well be so. I mean, they've already said this isn't, the Taliban victory isn't as pure as to the Taliban claim. So I think they will contest it. But there's also a good reason why the Taliban should try to suppress them, or at least present themselves as the barrier against ISIL, and use that as leverage with foreign states in order to get recognition, to get aid, and so forth.
We shall see what happens in the coming days. For the moment, Patrick Cockburn, thanks so much for joining us from Cork in Ireland. Thank you.